I'd like to welcome Ferenc Szőnyi to the studio, whom I met in Vernon, Canada, and that's when I first heard about this ultra race he completed. He cycled all the way across Canada, covering 12,500 kilometers. It was an incredible thing for me, and I thought that if I ever come home to Hungary, since I live in Canada now, I definitely want to meet him and have a conversation. And if I had to briefly summarize what this race is about, it's a self-supported race. You didn't have any help in Canada, and you went from Yukon, well, not running, but cycling, all the way to Newfoundland alone without any outside assistance, all at the age of 60 over the course of 45 days. So this is such an incredible feat that I didn't even know it was possible to do something like this. So where did the idea come from, this whole thing, or where did you first encounter it?
But the information actually came from my connections in sports. And as I read the numbers, read the details, 12,500 kilometers, well, that's just, I've always had this kind of longing for Canada. I like continents, I like great distances, but I had never seen a race like this, so I never thought about it. I never came across such a competition. Now, this particular piece of information was truly striking, and one must never overestimate the diligent work of other dedicated individuals in this specialized field. So, to meticulously map out this vast continental country, to precisely chart its intricate details by bicycle, traveling down to the very last meter, and then to conscientiously take full responsibility or provide an absolute guarantee for that immense undertaking, it is without a doubt a truly colossal task. And honestly, I didn't know that. I was just looking at it, such a distance, such a race. But
Well, it's quite a race. You actually cross 7 distinct time zones.
which is incredible.
It's amazing.
Yes, you know, even modern passenger airplanes have their range limit somewhere around 13,000 kilometers. And it's also known that every distance assumes or maps out the shortest route. I got word about the race roughly 8 months before it started. 8 months? Yes, that's when the race was. The information came that there would be such a race in November. Maybe it wasn't even a full 8 months, yes. And then I had to put it together in my mind that, well, this really is the longest race in the world.
Tell me a bit about what kind of terrain this route covered. How should we imagine it? Did you ride on bike paths? Did you go through highways? Or how should one picture such a 12,500 kilometer
Route? A huge handicap is that basically I traveled everywhere. People ask, where have you been in Canada? Well, everywhere. And as for the regions from the Yukon all the way through continental Canada, then across the area of the Five Lakes, Niagara, then the coastal regions, seashores, peninsulas, islands, an enormous expanse and distance. You see their warning and regulation system is basically a set of red buoys with a little arrow at the front installed on a navigation device, so you have to follow the route. This makes things simpler, but at the same time, it's also an obligation. In fact, not just any obligation, but an important one, that you must follow the designated route. The race organizer generously offered us an incredible adventure by successfully completing this challenging race. Not just a truly huge and incredibly fast journey, but also wonderfully introduced us to the beautiful landscapes and vibrant culture of Canada. It was incredibly diverse, yes, in fact, from the very wide and expansive shoulder of the 3-lane highway, all the way to the soft, challenging, and often difficult sandy trails where I literally had to carry my bicycle on my shoulder. I basically went through every conceivable type of road surface and terrain during the entire race.
That's truly incredible.
So I carefully climbed up here from the beautiful lakeshore. It wasn't easy at all, especially with the heavy bike, and even just finding the correct path was quite a significant challenge. Now this is precisely where the winding road ultimately brings us. For me, it's primarily about truly touring this magnificent country. So we're definitely not talking about speeding rapidly down some long, monotonous concrete road, but rather this is a marvel at my incredible country kind of scenic bike path. It's quite serious indeed. You absolutely have to factor these important things in when you're doing 300 kilometers a day. And here's the reliable Garmin device clearly showing that we're going exactly the right way. Thank goodness for that, truly. By the way, we unfortunately don't have any bear spray with us anymore, but I honestly have no idea whatsoever what I'd realistically do if a large bear suddenly appeared right in front of us here.
And you don't get it? The human mind just can't grasp why I need to.
Remote areas, so I've been living there for a year and the distances are just enormous. We also went to the Rocky Mountains, and there was a sign saying that for the next 250 kilometers there would be no cell service, and there really isn't, so you can't call anyone. You don't even meet another living soul. So
At the edge of the cities, there's always a sign, a warning sign telling you to check your fuel, and that was a warning for me too. Sometimes I even had to turn back. If there was a sign saying there's nothing for the next 100 kilometers, then you know it's 100 kilometers, and that's not just a 5 to 6 hour adventure at 30 kilometers per hour. But if that stretch includes a national park with dirt roads, it could easily turn into an all-day adventure, spending the whole day out there, needing food, water, and energy. That's a serious issue. And we haven't even factored in the time of day you reach the edge of the city, because if you see that sign at 4 in the afternoon, your mind immediately starts racing. What now? How do I go on if there's nothing ahead? Because you might not make it anywhere in time.
and what exactly would you consider changing about this particular route if you were indeed the organizer, now that...
Why did you do it? That's a big question. I'm telling you, I protested at every single detour, because when you see there's actually a normal road, but you have to take the alternative route, and there were some extreme examples of this, like when the alternative route takes you down to the seashore with a 300-meter elevation change. You walk through a fishing village for no apparent reason, and you don't understand why. And then you have to climb back up from the fishing village, only to arrive at a road construction site where the tunnel you're supposed to go through is closed, and there's a sign saying closed, road closed, so you just have to figure it out. Just do it. I think there's an enormous amount of work put into this route and a huge amount of responsibility on the part of the race organizers to take this on, and that's exactly what they're doing. So this is a distance that is constantly changing. So imagine it like an anthill. So when we look at an anthill, it always seems to be in the same place, but in reality, it's in constant motion. So over 12,500 kilometers, there are so many intersections, so many changes every single day that it's very difficult to keep track of them all. It's probably impossible. I think for the sake of those who come after us that we shouldn't change this. Maybe when it comes to providing information, we shouldn't just draw the competitors' attention to the general race rules, but we should especially emphasize to them that this isn't just about going from point A to point B. Here, you're embarking on a huge adventure across Canada, so be prepared for the fact that there might be nowhere to sleep and nothing to eat.
There will be bears, there will be wolves, there will be everything. Anything can happen, yes?
Yes. How many
kilometers of the route were on the highway?
I don't know. You see, here the concept of a highway gets intertwined. What exactly is a highway? It was the TransCanada highway, which was actually fully developed. And that's where you realize that in the big cities, Montreal, Toronto, there were these major highways, and from everywhere it tried to get me off them. So at the first opportunities, there were always alternative routes, either taking the old highway, going into towns, or using parallel roads. There were a lot of parallel roads as well. I think that here, again, the distances are so vast that you really have no other way to go. So here, of course, we're talking about modern road construction. All of Canada is a very young country, and its road network is even younger. So we're not talking about a classic road bulldozed over ancient camel caravan routes. There isn't any.
No alternative M7 highway next to old Route 7. If something happens, take the other. Many places are like this.
There is no alternative. So the Transcontinental Highway itself is 6,700 kilometers long, I think. And in many places there is nothing else. So if you go off the road, you cannot actually get off. And this is really extreme compared to the roads we are used to cycling on. It is terrible, how should I put it? It is a big deal that you cannot even take care of your most basic human needs. There is nowhere to stop with your bike. There is nothing to lean your bike against. It is a huge problem. You can go for hundreds of kilometers without a single object in the landscape.
I'm saying this from my own experience too, because we also live out in the countryside. We were driving on the highway and suddenly I saw a sign saying, watch out for cyclists. And I was shocked, like, oh my God, they actually let cyclists onto the highway. How can they do that? Then I talked to people afterwards and they said, man, there's no other way. Either you go on that road or you don't go at all. So it's just completely...
It was unusual for me too, so I also had to face it, and I saw the cyclists myself. The only bonus is that there aren't any cyclists. So the option is there, and as far as I know, there's even some regulation about this, that really, where there's no alternative, you can go on the highway. It's completely normal. You know, I've been to India as well. We haven't talked about this, but last year I crossed India from north to south, from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, and there's a similar situation there. Until there's another route in India, everyone just goes wherever they want. To put it simply, in India you can encounter cyclists, people on small motorbikes, big motorcycles, or even horse-drawn carriages anywhere, anytime. So even the highways are used in this way. How many kilometers was that trip in India? The India trip was 3,780 kilometers. With the Binga, well, it was adventurous, quite similar. I've been to India too.
So I know what the conditions are like. That's really not much.
Really not much at all. Here in Canada, by the way, the difference is that people think cycling is dangerous in India, but it's not dangerous at all because there are so many cyclists there that drivers are used to sharing the road with them. In Canada, it was much, much more dangerous. Exponentially, I mean, with many zeros, it was far more dangerous to ride a bike. Literally, I was practically just an obstacle on the road. So I can see this as I am also a professional driver. I have a license and I have driven millions of kilometers on the roads. Cyclists were the most annoying for drivers. I especially have to highlight the Canadian truck drivers, the ones on the road, the drivers, you know, with these 70-ton vehicle monsters with 2 or 3 trailers attached. And of course, the logging trucks are legendary, but other mining vehicles are also massive in terms of their weight. And as you know, in Canada, there is officially no speed limit. So basically, except for within the cities, there's no monitoring at all. And out in the countryside, there's nothing. So in practice, they go as fast as they can, and they really do push this to the limit. So the bigger you are, the faster you go. So you're absolutely not safe on the road at any time. I constantly felt like I was in danger.
Of course, especially at night and at times like that, that's the one.
Nighttime driving is especially tricky, especially under limited road conditions, when it's raining or foggy or just generally awful and dangerous. I saw myself from the outside. There were times I just wanted to escape that environment, get off that road as soon as possible, because it's a constant state of stress, a really serious stress problem.
What was the distance you've cycled in kilometers?
Well, I didn't know. I just knew I couldn't stop, and I kept going. The most was around 520. Several times it was over 400, 450, 480, 420. Most of the time, you can't stop, so there's nowhere to stop. And 2,
Barton.
lap? Yes, or sometimes right at the first stop I experienced that. What I misjudged was that the next stop is about 100 kilometers away. So I think it's wise to stop and recharge, eat, drink, but there's nothing there. So you arrive somewhere where there should be something, but there's absolutely nothing. That's the real drama, you know, when you're looking for a place to stay. So when it's already evening, you're tired, you'd like to eat, drink, go to bed or do anything, and there's just nothing there. So you arrive at a closed site or at a work area where, if you're lucky, they'll let you in, but otherwise you have no business being there. And when you arrive at such a place, hungry, thirsty, without water, soaked from the rain, it can be pretty brutal.
I can actually feel it. So I think that finding a place to stay, managing your food, managing your drinks, figuring out when you'll have them, these were at least as big of a challenge. These are huge things. Well, this too. And
then, of course, let's talk about the terrain, about what you had with you. So the bicycle, the level of maintenance required for the bike, operating it, checking it daily, servicing it. You had to
manage it yourself so that the service shop would be open when you arrived.
Of course, so on the one hand, there's a daily inspection routine, the chain, lubrication, the condition of the wheels and tires, the electrical system. And then there's the matter of distance in terms of time, space, and kilometers, meaning the system also needs servicing, so these parts need to be replaced as well. So you don't need to replace the tire because it's gotten old sitting in the basement, but because it's worn out. I had to replace 5 tires, 2 in the front, 3 in the back, because these tires wore out. And of course, there's a level of wear where it's no longer advisable to keep going, because from the risk of a flat tire to many other factors, a lot comes into play. So it was mandatory to replace them, and you had to figure out where to do it. Not like here, where you just go to a repair shop in the city because you know there are 2 bike shops. Instead, you had to think it through 1,000 to 2,000 kilometers in advance. How many kilometers are on the tire? I've been riding in the rain for 2 days, so the chain is probably already lacking lubrication and is worn again. Sometimes you had to take alternative routes through mud and muck, which wears things down even more, and you can hear it grinding. For example, if a cable snaps, then you can't shift gears, or at least not with the same quality. And who knows where you'll be able to fix the misalignment that you're dealing with. You have to take out your phone, look it up, and if there are even more restrictions, like it's evening or there's no
signal.
Yes, depending which one.
It often happens in Canada. And then there's the whole accommodation search. I know that in those places that are popular, like national parks or their surroundings, finding a place to stay can be a challenge even months or even days in advance. So by noon, you more or less know where you'll stop for the night. And you have to manage all of this on your own out there in the middle of nowhere without any signal. So this is...
Yes, well, this also had a kind of how should I put it? You had to learn it, you had to integrate into it, you had to adapt. Of course, there were the first failed attempts, and there were a lot of those in the first week. When you had to keep going, you couldn't stop, or you absolutely had to stop and had to ask somewhere if you could stay. I ended up in some very strange places, and as we talked about, since I'm telling this story, I arrived in just such a city, a big mining town, and it was already quite late, sometime in the afternoon, around 5 o'clock, or maybe even later. It was already past 7. So I checked on my smart device to see where there were hotels or accommodations, because by then I was smart enough to do that. And I saw that there were 8 to 10 hotels in the town, but all of them were zeroed out, meaning there was no information about them. That's already a bad sign. It means that on booking.com or wherever, there are no available listings there. So it meant that there simply wasn't anything available there. And the first accommodation, the second, the third, there was no accommodation anywhere. And I went into a motel and knocked at the reception, and a lady came out, a pleasant Spanish-looking lady around 50, and there was an instant mutual sympathy between us, but she told me there were no rooms available. And I told her, and I really needed it because I had already been turned away from 3 places, and she asked, "So where are you coming from?" And I told her about half of my story, about what kind of venture I had gotten myself into, and this story touched her. It was very interesting, you know. They have a big motel, American-Canadian style. So it's typical, right? The cars are parked in front of the house, in front of the door, and I see that it's a 30-room motel, so it's a big deal. And she tells me to go down to the city. There will be more there. But, you know, go down to the city in car language means the city is 8 kilometers long. And by the way, now you have to descend 300 meters in elevation to the riverside, or maybe 30, whatever. It's a lot. But actually, I'm on a bicycle. Yes, she says she sees and knows how difficult that is. Well, if you think this is difficult again, then help with it. I'm looking for accommodation. Let's solve this. Any solution works for me. A small room, a mattress, anything, as long as I can charge my devices and have somewhere to sleep. And she says, well, she has to discuss it with her husband, but come in. And she took me to the reception, and behind the reception was their apartment, and I found myself in their living room. And she says that actually they have a guest room, and she's just decided, but her husband will be home soon, that I can sleep here. And she said, well, by then we were really in the living room, in the kitchen. She opened the fridge, took out some orange juice, took out a banana, eat, drink, then you can sleep here. She showed me into the bedroom, the guest room. Here's the bathroom, here are the towels. I had moved into their life. On one hand, I was deeply touched by the experience, and on the other, it truly was an incredibly interesting and quite memorable adventure for me. When the husband eventually arrived, it turned out he had already successfully completed a challenging half Ironman competition, and he's actually a very dedicated athlete, and they are indeed world travelers. Imagine this. On the wall of the reception area, there were about 8 large framed photos from 80 different and diverse countries around the entire world. They had been to Hungary, to Vienna, to Bratislava, and immediately, as soon as he arrived, he enthusiastically shared their fascinating stories, and such a strong, profound sense of community quickly developed between us. It was truly incredible. I said that I don't really have time to socialize because I'd rather eat and drink, and
He says
that everything is closed, only one store is open, so I'll go down to the store to shop. All right, go ahead. So I put on my shoes, grabbed my backpack, and set off to the store. 1.5 kilometers. It's not that far, just had a little hill, and then they come after me by car. Well, you can't say you're on foot. I said I was on a bike, but they didn't think I really was. So I went down to the store, did the shopping, went back up, ate, drank basically at their place. They discreetly withdrew. It was really, really interesting. By the way, I wake up at 3 in the morning, and by 3:30 I'm out the door. They said, okay, then let's say goodbye now. So we said our goodbyes.
very good. What was your daily routine like? What did a day look like for you? When did you get up? How much did you get up? How many kilometers did you cover in a day?
Well, there was the initial adjustment period when you're still full of energy and basically feel capable of anything, and you think that way, so you have to integrate, you have to get used to the environment. At first, the 24/7 shifts weren't far from me either, so we often ended up working around the clock, meaning we worked through the night. After approximately 1 full week of dedicated effort and careful consideration, I successfully developed a comprehensive and reliable method for how to safely and securely find suitable accommodation for myself, and subsequently, I meticulously figured out the most effective way and the precise methodology for consistently making significant and tangible progress in my endeavors. Basically, I would wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning and set off an hour later. Of course, during that hour, I wasn't just lazing around. It was active work, strange as it may sound. First and foremost, I absolutely had to meticulously charge, thoroughly check, carefully duplicate, completely waterproof, and then finally start up all the essential electronic devices for the entire day ahead. Of course, it wasn't just the navigation device. There was also a phone, 2 navigation devices, batteries, a GoPro that had to be used continuously, a satellite phone that also served as a beacon and had to be kept running at all times. And then there was another aspect, the clothing, which was also extremely important. You see, I was struggling with an extremely minimal amount of clothing. There were short and long, big-bottomed underwear. For the top, I had 3 long-sleeve, 3 or 2 short-sleeve shirts, rainproof gear, full rainproof setup, then glasses, a hat, a neck gaiter, and other such accessories. All of these had to be dried. Everything had to be ready, fresh, and clean so that in the morning I could set off in good condition. And then, of course, there was the bicycle, which is very important. The primary check is to make sure the chain is oiled, the chain is cleaned, the tires are inflated to at least 6.5 bar. These are not easy things to take care of on the go, so you get up at 3 or 4 in the morning and then eat, though we haven't even talked about nutrition yet. Fill up the water bottle, fill up the camera bag, make sure the quality is right. Always have isotonic powder if possible. If not, then there's one isotonic drink company whose products I always used in my camera bag, so only that is filled up, but make sure it's filled. Of course, you don't fill it up in the morning. You need to know the night before what you're going to put in it. So, if nothing else, at least there's a vending machine available, though that was very rare, or a restaurant, which, as you can see, made everything more expensive. So you could buy things at a restaurant or at a gas station, but everywhere the prices were usually double.
Did you have any injuries or falls or anything like that along the way? After all, 12,500 kilometers is a huge distance.
Well, you can't avoid that. There are serious falls, high-speed crashes, things like that. But luckily I got through everything without any major issues. One time in the evening during a nighttime adventure, I ended up on a dirt road, got caught in a rut, and the bike threw me off to the inside. So I did hit myself, landed on my left hip, couldn't unclip in time, really slammed myself down, and ended up with some minor bruises from it. And then there were a couple of minor falls, like when you can't unclip at a traffic light, you just happen to lean the wrong way, or a car in front of you stops awkwardly, so you also stop awkwardly, and honestly, that's just how we usually get off the bike. There are stories like that. The injury, I actually got my first more serious injury in the first week. Again, it was related to rain and cold. You become less flexible, your muscles change, and if after exertion you can't stretch properly, regenerate, simply because you're tired and it doesn't even occur to you that you should be stretching now. And in the cold rain, my Achilles, right here, I almost reached for it just now, but really it's right here, under the muscle of my left Achilles, there was a tear. There's nothing you can do about it, you just have to use it. And so
You just kept riding, of course.
you just know what happens, so you protect it a little. On the bike trainer, you don't use it, or at least you don't use it as actively. You can ride a bike without it, with your foot held down. I've learned a lot during my athletic career. Well, you try to keep moving symmetrically, but the inactivity of that foot led to overactivity in the right foot, which resulted in an injury to the right leg's lifting muscle. The next day, or the day after, I got a right leg lifting muscle injury, which was more bothersome and more painful. Interestingly, it wasn't really part of the movement sequence, but it caused quite serious complaints. I had 2 major muscle injuries. The rest were minor things like a sore throat, bronchitis, sinusitis. Because you sniffle, your nose runs, but otherwise I actually got through this pretty much unscathed.
The race, the fact that you kept a continuous diary about this competition. I also kept track of where you were through those entries. How did you manage to write this diary? I mean, just imagine you arrive at the hotel completely exhausted, you have 6 hours to sleep, eat, and do everything else, and in the meantime you still write these posts. That's incredible.
There were 2 types of journaling, one of which you don't know about. One type was for the whole race. A film is being made about the Scandala Ultra, and one element of that was the camera, which I handled. I was the cameraman, the operator, who, with the help of a GoPro, continuously filmed and recorded the locations I found interesting, and part of this was journaling. So every day, a diary entry was recorded about the previous day, what experiences I had, what happened, how much, in what way, how I was living through all of this. But there was another diary about the race day, the monstrous race day, which reached many people, and fortunately millions could read it. That one really was just me opening it up, writing it, and after the first couple of days, it became clear that I was completely unsuited for this. It's not simply just
Typing these out on a mobile phone and then
standing here, so because I had to steal time for it, there simply wasn't time since the phone was only open when I was eating. All the other time was spent doing something useful, so I was always doing something else meanwhile. I was bathing, washing, eating, drinking, whatever I was doing, so I could only use my phone to communicate when I was actually eating, and this really wasn't an easy thing. So the decision was made, and what happened was that I communicated everything via video call with Sylvia, my wife, and with Estala, my daughter. Then I sent a voice recording to the race diary about how I saw things, and my daughter translated it and tried to condense it into a brief entry. So it was a three-person job like this.
they helped here. That's what made it really great.
Such absurd things came up that even I don't remember them. There are diary entries that I simply have no idea how they were made. Like, what would you like on the second to last day, or what would you like when you get home? And then it comes up that, well, I'd like to swim with dolphins in the ocean. There were some interesting things. Well, exhaustion has its levels, and here, reality often disappeared.
What was the best and what was the worst part during this trip to Canada? Which part did you like the most and which the least?
I was really looking forward to this trip. I was very curious about the wilderness. It's interesting because my idea of the wilderness as a Central European, or at least my own philosophy, is that it means very tall trees, lush vegetation, lots of birds and all sorts of things. But the Canadian wilderness is completely different. It's a rough, dry, rocky place. Actually, I was really looking forward to experiencing the Rocky Mountains, and not just the landscape itself, but also the environment, the altitude. I was really curious about how difficult that would be or not.
How many meters of elevation gain were there in this race?
It was 90,000, 89,700 or something like that in the official version, but obviously it's not less, but definitely more than 90,000. What made it positive was that climbing the rocky sections by bike was much more predictable than, say, going around a coastal peninsula, because here you just have to go up, then down, and you can see, okay, it's 2,000 and you're done. The coastline is much worse. It's much harder. What every traveler really looks forward to, of course, is Vancouver. It's a wonder, an almost endless city on the shore of the Pacific Ocean, which was a huge revelation for me. But I devoured it because I arrived late in the afternoon. And I remember entering the city, taking an alternative route along the highway to cross it. And then you immediately turn and you're already heading out. But actually, it's about 100 kilometers, so the city is incredibly sprawling. What I was also really looking forward to was Nilvara, the area of the 5 lakes. And you imagine the lake to be like Lake Valence or Lake Balaton, but it actually looks more like a sea. Yes, but it's not. It's enormous. These lakes are like oceans. They're huge. You can't see across them. It's incredible that you can walk for days along a single lake. Just Newfoundland alone, where the final finish was St. John's, is 110,000 square kilometers. So even that tiny little island at the very end of the whole race is bigger than Hungary. People just don't realize these things. So what did you expect? Actually, I was really looking forward to St. John's, the small town with the lighthouse. It's actually completely normal for someone to look forward to the finish, to wonder when they'll finally arrive.
It must have been an amazing feeling to reach the finish line.
Arriving at the finish was really something special. All along there's a kind of healthy doubt inside you. You know, it's the distance. You can't really grasp it even today. And the distance, the goal, it was always marked out every day. So it never even crossed your mind where we were actually heading. For me, it was the daily short-term goals that were achievable, but the main driving force was the 300. So, you know, it was always on my mind as a competitor that if I get up in the morning and push out 100 by 9 o'clock, that's already done. By noon, the next one, or by 1 o'clock, and it was always like that. The goal was to have about half of the daily quota done by noon, or 1, and then in the afternoon to pace myself and strategize so that I get as close to 300 as possible by the end of the day. Sometimes it was 270, sometimes 220, sometimes 320, but usually around 300. It was really hard, a huge amount of work, because the natural and environmental conditions didn't help. The rain, the wind, especially if it rained, then it was just terrible. You couldn't escape it. You have 2 options. Either you stop, but you can't in the wet, or you just keep going. So there was no other chance but You can't take cover in a...
Shelter or... But where would you go? There's nothing.
There's nothing, no terrain features, nothing at all. So it's not like you can just pull over and stop. I even imagined that since I had a sleeping bag with me, maybe I'd stop somewhere, but there's no somewhere. There's nothing. There's forest, there are bears, there's the main road, rain, hills. And by the way, the next settlement is about 110 kilometers away. Just survive. That's what you have to get through, not the finish line, so it's really, really far. That dividing line was kind of like Niagara, where at the end of the tunnel you could almost see
The
light. Yes, yes. From there, it was as if you could see that from that point there were only about 4,000 left, which is still a lot, still incredibly far, even from there. And you never really understand the end of it, what these little, if you look at the map, these islands, Turkish island, half island, you go around. Why?
ferrying.
Well, the ferries, their positioning, buying tickets in advance, you know, sometimes you had to buy tickets weeks ahead. Well, when do you get there? Do you arrive at dawn or at night? In what condition do you arrive? Can you buy something to eat or drink somewhere, or can't you? And then I was waiting for that last big ferry too, the one that took you out to Newfoundland, and they wrote that there were new restaurants and all sorts of things. So I really prepared myself. I pushed through the whole day, and when I got there, but by then almost
Everything was already closed.
yes, and then they finally open the ferry. We get on board, and there's just one cafe where you can buy the same things you always get at a gas station. Someone buys a pudding, a sandwich, and a Coke. It's awful. And basically, well, yes, you just have to accept it. There's no other option, no escape. And
How did you handle the monotony? You were practically alone for 45 days. You did everything by yourself. Did you listen to music during that time
how did you manage?
with that?
No, it's interesting. Actually, I love being alone, but this really armed me with something special. Well, not even special, but you really get to know yourself during this time. And the plural, you hear me speaking in plural several times even now. That was mainly for the camera, you know. I spoke to the camera as if I were having a monologue. There was this kind of lifeline that the bike is a bit underrepresented. Actually, it was a really well-equipped bike. I had some carbon bike that basically had the best of everything. The wheels, the tires, the hub dynamo, the lights. That's how I ended up assembling the bike as well. And it became a companion. It became such a companion that although it never got a name, and I think my bike is actually female, it became the kind of companion that deserves to be addressed. I didn't talk to it, so I didn't develop any kind of attachment like that, but yes, it was there, so we accomplished this thing together. So this camera and the bike, it's a bit more than just numbers. There's also a sense of respect for those who came before me in it. So it's not just me, but also those 3 other competitors who have already completed the route. There was a certain reassurance, a little something to hold on to for me in the fact that others had already managed to do it. Just to clarify, I have successfully completed the incredibly challenging 480-kilometer Hell Ultra Himalaya race in India, not just once, but on 2 separate occasions. No one had completed it before me. The uncertainty was a good first challenge. The certainty that I know for sure I am capable of it, but nothing proves it until you actually reach the finish line. It was a bit of a help for me that I had people to share this experience with, that I was on that path with women as well. These things helped with the loneliness, along with modern navigation, the phone, and daily contact, which in 90% of cases was available. These really eased things for me. And they made it more colorful too. It was really great wherever I gave an interview. Even Hungarian radio hosts follow these adventures. Every Friday at 9:30 Hungarian time, I would check in. And there were times when, as I mentioned, the time difference kept getting smaller. By the end, it was only 4.5 hours. 9:30 meant 5 in the morning. And of course, at 5 in the morning, I had to be on the road. So it really was like I'd get up at 2, and by 3, I was already on the move. And somewhere out there, not even near a settlement, just under a street lamp, there was only one lamp, and somewhere inside a house. I stopped and waited for the call to come, and it did. It's interesting that these systems work even far from civilization. That's good.
Did you listen to music in the meantime? No?
No, there are 2 reasons for that. One is simply that I'm not interested. I'm interested in the outside world. The other is that you actually need the noise of the outside world. You need to hear what's around you, what's coming, what's approaching, from which direction, and at what speed. It's very important. Sometimes survival depends on pulling the steering wheel in time. I'm not joking.
Yes. When we met, I saw that you had this little saddlebag-like thing about, I don't know, 20 centimeters by 10 centimeters, or maybe 10 by 8 centimeters. And I was surprised, wondering where the rest of your stuff was. How can you set off for 45 days with a bag that small? Why don't you have big side bags or something? Other people travel with suitcases. Yes, this has.
Also an ideal size for what we take with us, what I take with me. We can start from the bottom: socks, shoes, slippers, pants. It's not just about the race. Like, there's a civilian side to it as well. Like, when you stop, or before you set off at the hotel, or when you go inside somewhere. So you can't just go in dirty. For example, you can't walk into a store barefoot. After the first hole, the first rain, the first serious challenges, and a few times when I ended up with nothing, when there was no hotel after the first 24-hour stretches, there was a kind of review. On the fourth or fifth day, I had to sit down in a hotel room and really force myself to face the fact, Ferry, this can't go on like this. So I got rid of my shirt, got rid of my pants, got rid of my shoes, got rid of my slippers, got rid of my backpack or my sleeping bag, and of course I even had to reduce my headgear. So I had to accept that I didn't need 2 outer covers, only one could stay. The inner tubes are fine, but they need to be swapped for butyl ones to make them as light as possible. The problem with the medical kits was that they were sized for 45 days. But it was already clear that if I was healthy and would remain so, I would only need a third of it. So even the medical kit had to be repacked to take up as little space as possible, because it wasn't heavy, it just took up a lot of room. So the whole thing became a game of tinkering to make it as small as possible. That's how it ended up, as you saw, that I had a small, slim backpack, and in the backpack there were 2 shirts, one long-sleeved, one short-sleeved, and a pair of long pants, or sometimes the shorts I was wearing. In the bag under the saddle were the things I absolutely didn't need. For example, a spare tire with an inner tube, our national flag, which was actually quite large, but I would only need it at the very end. The raincoat, rain pants, gaiters, these kinds of gear, and the rest of the bag was also packed with all sorts of stuff. And then all the rest still fit into the frame bag: the technical equipment, the batteries, the headlamp, the safety light, the cables, which were all duplicated, the flashlight, which also served as a backup for the rear light. So all of these could fit into the frame bag. So I ended up with a pretty minimalistic set of equipment and gear on the continent. Yes, you said that you encountered a lot
Of animals, I certainly know.
that the place is full of bears.
Because we also go hiking, and bear spray is basically an essential item. No one goes anywhere without it. What kind of adventures did you have with the animals?
Well, maybe the first one, we always come back to Yukon, since that's where we started, that's where the first big impressions happened, that's where I was dropped as if from outer space. And yes, the bear spray you mentioned is also a mandatory piece of equipment. You watch on YouTube how it works. You take off the cellophane just in case you need it, because of course you're convinced you will. At the first encounter, you just press the pedal in your solitude and somehow hope to reach some settlement. There's always some kind of movement associated with a settlement, either a car or a person. At first you just see something move in the distance, something you catch peripherally, and you don't even identify it, and soon enough you don't even need to. Yes, moving through the middle of the forest, there's movement, some kind of motion, and when the city finally appears, I knew a settlement was coming, the city was coming, a person on the road. And then, of course, 10 or 15 seconds later, when I look up, it's not a person, it's a bear on the road. Of course, I immediately slam on the brakes, so I stop. And the bear is about 100 to 150 meters in front of me. Well, you have to make a decision right away. You're forced to decide right there. Now, as soon as I noticed it, it noticed me too. Obviously, it's especially sensitive to stimuli, being a predator or semi-predator animal. What does it do immediately? Zipper, pull out the bear spray, get the bear spray out, take off the safety. What will happen? In 1 second or a few seconds, you have to think through what you're going to do. The bear is there now, and you have to go that way. It's behind you. You can't go back the way you came. At times like this, there's no help, no car coming, no truck coming. There's no one to expect help from, because you're alone in the middle of the wilderness. You have to solve it yourself. You have to get going. Even if the bear goes away, what are you expecting in 3, 5, or 10 minutes? How far do you think the bear will go? You won't see it anyway, so you have to make a decision. I made up my mind, turned around, took it out, put the spray in the frame bag facing out, shifted down 2 gears so I could start quickly, and set off at high speed towards the bear. So I decided that fighting it was nonsense because I looked at the bear's build, I checked how big these bears are even here at home, and for us, we don't stand a chance. Even a dachshund is hard to handle. You can't outrun a bear.
You can't climb a tree because it will climb after you and it can swim too. So
there's no chance. Basically, your only chance is the element of surprise, or if you have the spray and can use it right in its face. But let's try to avoid that situation. You have to keep moving. It's mandatory. There was no undergrowth here. So I kept walking and the bear decided it was better to leave. It was really great to see that as soon as I started moving, the bear immediately started moving too and went off to the right, disappearing into the forest. But the fear was still there. The turning back and then setting off with great force meant that by the time I got there, it was about 40. And the fear, there are all sorts of Sekeli expressions for this, as they say. The observer doesn't fit into a person's body language. Yes, of course you get nervous, wondering what's going to happen now. What could happen? If it wants to eat you, then you're in trouble. You know, you have to unclip, so you're strapped into the pedals, you unclip, grab the bear spray. It's right there, within reach. You have to know what to do. You can't make a mistake. Yes, you have a couple more seconds.
to figure it out, you thought you had to consume 10,000 kilocalories a day. It's just insane. Even just figuring out how to put that together is a challenge in itself, I think.
10,000
calories while you're riding, and you also have to sleep and do everything else.
Well, here the quantity is definitely an important thing. The menu starts with a small, which is a 4 deciliter Coke. The medium is 6 deciliters, and the large is 8 to 9 deciliters, something like a gallon measurement. Then with coffee, it's the same kind of quantities. There's long coffee, extended coffee, and you have to tell the server that you want the large one with 10 sugars. That's when they usually give you a look. And then
once you even messed up, you bought it was like a dead coffee at that point. Yeah, because there was this.
It was a fast food funk specialty shop, so to speak. Every big city has a franchise store for a baseball player. So actually, I love it, and I'm addicted to carbs, and especially to funk. And he has this, I'll tell you in a second, not Dallas, but
I saw that it was that kind of coffee. Yeah.
Yes. So it's a donut, a regular-sized palm-fitting donut with chocolate and caramel topping filled with vanilla pudding. A real calorie bomb. I usually have 2 or 3 of those as well. And I also usually get this garlic cube and have it with coffee, arriving at dawn, completely soaked, my clothes all wet. What I do is park my bike in front of the shop, hang my wet windbreaker on it, then go into the bathroom, change into dry clothes, and then go up to the counter and say what I'd like to order. And she asked, I said a large coffee. She asked, what size coffee do you want? I'd like a large coffee. All right. And as she was ringing it up, I said I'd also like the 2 donuts and the 2 garlic cubes as well. What, 5 to 18? That was really expensive. It's not usually that much. So then I went outside, turned my jacket inside out, strapped the wet stuff onto my backpack. I go back for it. And then there's this big box. I look at it and I'm like, what's this? Well, that's what you asked for, the coffee and the donuts. And the box had a front compartment, and then it had this trailer part like a pickup truck. And inside there were 10 cups and the little donuts, but the donuts looked so small in there. I picked it up and it was this massive thing, like 3 kilos. What the is this? So I took it down to the table and there was a tap on it, like a communal beer tap. Well, it was a half-gallon, 1.8 liter coffee. Apparently office workers usually bring these too. But I hadn't seen that they had ones this big, so of course I picked the largest one. I had to figure it out, so I got 22 creamers for it, plus all kinds of spoons and everything. And then I set out 10 cups, filled each one halfway. And while I was doing this, while eating donuts, I cooled the cream and put it in the fridge, and even poured some into my water bottle. So I started working my way through that amount. But of course, that's a ton of calories. After a few days of running into dead ends, I started planning so that I would arrive somewhere in the evening. There were times when I had to stop as early as 4 p.m. because there was nowhere else to go. So what happened was at 4 p.m. I would check in, eat and drink, and then at 11 p.m. I would set off again and continue on. So my daily rest was never more than that. When it came to eating in these cases, there was usually a chance that something would be open, so either a restaurant or a shop. I liked the shop the most. At times like this, I would completely empty out my backpack, go into the shop and do my shopping. Should I tell you what I bought? I bought isotonic drinks. I bought 3 large bottles, about 0.7 liters each, those big ones. Then I bought 2 bottles of cola. Then I bought some fruit juice for dinner. I bought a liter of cocoa. This is just the drink section. After that came the food. I would buy a sandwich, or if there wasn't a sandwich, I get salami or, for example, bacon. Here you have to imagine everything in large quantities, like say 400 grams of ham, 200 or 250 grams of cheese. I usually eat yogurt if they have it, and I like to eat fruit. Fruit is very important. A kilo of strawberries or 1.5 kilos of cherries or something similar, 1 or 2 bananas as well. Cocoa was always a staple. I drank a lot of cocoa. It was a very important thing for me. And then I put all this in my backpack, went into my room with it, and laid it all out on the table. Of course, this covered 3 meals as well. Oh, and we haven't even talked about the chocolate yet. The chocolate for the next day. I also needed to get some carb-rich pastries for breakfast. Then I had to buy chocolate to take with me, and some candy that wouldn't melt. And of course, I had to sort all of these out. The first things I'll eat now: bacon, cheese, ham, and so on. For breakfast, I eat the same things: bacon, ham, cheese, peppers, tomatoes, fruits. And of course, what I can actually take with me is usually just the carbs. So from energy bars to little chocolates, I won't even say which kind. A little shot of liquor too.
That's you could manage.
Whatever fit into the small bag, whatever fit into the backpack. There was also a first aid kit. After the first few days, it became mandatory for me to always carry a rope and a first aid kit, which was at least 2 packs. One with dried nuts, the other with some kind of sugar that wouldn't melt. I always carried these with me as a basic necessity, so since then, I've always had a backup for my backup. But even during the day, I had to replenish these things. That's how this routine developed. Bacon, cheese, huge portions. At first, I drank about 2 liters of cocoa a day. Later on, only about 1 liter each day. You can buy lactose-free cocoa in large quantities. In the first days, I drank 2 liters, 1.9, and I think the biggest cocoa comes in a half-gallon size. I was able to drink cocoa with my lunch as part of my meal. 2 liters, it's incredible. On one hand, it's a gift from life. On the other, it's an appetite. I consider this a gladiator's diet. I could only eat well twice a day, once in the morning when I had what I provided for myself, and in the evening when I could go shopping, if I could go shopping at all, and not
You actually got there at 11 o'clock when
everything was already gone. That's when you end up digging out the last M&M from your own little bag, or searching for it at the bottom of your bag, and you had to create some kind of emergency stash, maybe a pack of chips or a pack of seeds. Then you sit down in the quiet solitude of the dressing room and with some water, eat your last bit of sugar or seeds. Yes, that's how it is.
these are incredible amounts from an eating perspective, but as far as I know, when you arrived, you were skin and bones and you still lost weight. So even if you had a bit of bacon at the end,
You couldn't see it. Well, yes, I started at about 83 kilos and I arrived at 71 to 72. So despite the fact that I tried to eat properly, this isn't a wish fulfillment show. Unfortunately, from my perspective, I ate a lot of useless things just for the calorie count. So I had to eat them. Chips were the most typical, or sweets. I basically filled up on carbs, whatever was available, so protein was really lacking. I lost a lot of muscle mass as well. My body changed because of the journey. It really did get easier. By the end, cycling felt noticeably lighter. I lost the weight that I was basically carrying around like a battery.
you mentioned that a documentary is being made about this whole adventure. Can you tell us anything about it? What format will it be? Where will it be available to watch? How long will it be? What will be included?
What exactly is this about? Of course, for some people, it's just a self-serving display of competitiveness. It's a performance, someone puts it on, shows what they can do. It turned out really well for them, so it's a niche sport. Well, yes, but let's look at the numbers, let's look at the location, let's look at the person. You see, this person we're talking about, Szőnyi Ferenc, has completed the world's most brutal races. He's been to Peru, he's been to Argentina, he's crossed the South American continent 3 times by bicycle, he's conquered the Himalayas countless times by bike and on foot, and by the way, he's a world champion in ultra triathlon. He set a world record, so he's not just doing it for himself. He can also prove himself among competitors. Who is this man? Where did he come from? What does he want? Is he crossing a continent? Even by plane, it's a lot. By car, it's unthinkable. It's a program that takes several weeks. By bicycle, that's really something. So let's make a film out of this. Let's do it. But how? You can't follow him. And as the race organizer, following is out of the question, and so is influencing the competitor in any way or giving assistance. If a cameraman is there with him the whole time, that's assistance. Obviously, it's a strong indication that you're capable of it. Go for it, go for it. So let's figure out what the concept is. Of course, you can film before, you can film after, you can film at the finish line and at the start as well. Let's create a framework. And that's how Albert came up with the idea that if we're professionals and we say we're actually the best in the world, then let's approach it accordingly. Then we dedicate the best crew, the best assistants, and the best camera for what we believe to be the best possible outcome. A budget scale was established, a team was formed to make this happen, and a dramaturgy was developed to define the concept. My task was to operate the GoPro, to handle the camera. It was essentially an extension of my own eyes. I've always loved taking pictures and photographing, and we recorded a huge amount of footage, several gigabytes worth. YouTube is the main target. There's an ideal length, a film of about 50 minutes, and we already want to enter it into competitions as well. What makes it special is the competition venue itself and the fact that this can't be reproduced. There's no re-editing, no retakes.
Tell me a little about the helpers. Who are they?
Who helped you along the way. It's very important. This segment was practically completely dedicated to that. There were helpers I didn't even see myself. Usually the most important helpers are the contacts. There was always an emergency number you could call. And of course there's the person you can always turn to. Sylvia, my wife, who was always there for me at home, both offline and online, constantly, always. Esther, my daughter, my eldest, who is actually a marketer and loves what she does. And she really enjoyed showcasing and making all of this visible too. Szőnyi, Ferenc, we're talking about a race diary here. There were also small helpers, including you, who were there and in a way became part of the race. I always tried to connect with Hungarians at every race and every location. It was no different in Canada either. Already at the start of the race in Yukon, I managed to approach a blogger, a Hungarian blogger, who was sitting there. So in a way, I made him a part of this endeavor too. The start also happened through him. It was a virtual start in Yukon on June 8th at 6 a.m. So the race started with a stopwatch, but there, a small Hungarian community saw me off with a Hungarian flag, which was a beautiful thing.
You started running at the age of 43, if I remember correctly, your first 5 to 6 kilometers.
It was a challenge.
Currently,
even 3 kilometers was a challenge, but that's completely normal. If we look at today's society, the current growing generation, our children at this age, entire generations are growing up in such a way that sport is not a part of their lives.
That's a problem.
This is a multi-layered social issue. Obviously, infrastructure matters a lot. Where you are, the communities that build and support it, those communities where physical activity plays a role. This could be a workplace community or a sports or civilian community. The absence of these is just as visible in society, how people experience this or how much they are able to be a part of it. For me, this realization came at 43, that it would be so nice to be like I was 20 years ago, and really, you can't run the same way. Your body image isn't the same. Your physical activity isn't what it used to be. You too. Did it never cross your mind
that you would ever give up?
There's no place for that. And this was exactly the kind of realization I had, that giving up is not an option. You can only get out where the finish line is. Of course, there are plenty of ways, but even giving up is something you have to figure out. It's not just that you give up. You have to find a place for that too. Where do you drop out? You'd have to find a city where you could say, okay, I'll go into a hotel, find a box for the bike, and figure out how to send it back, how to give up. Giving up yourself on the bike, that's not an option.
Thank you so much for taking the time and for having this conversation with me. I wish you many more adventures like this in the future.